Everyone, this is Brian Warren. Welcome to today's call with Grand President Rick Bennett and other members of the National Board. Before we get started, I would like to go over just a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. There are a few different ways you may be joining the call today. Some of you may be in front of a computer and using your computer's audio. Others may be in front of their computer but using their telephone for audio. Others may have dialed in by telephone only and will not be in front of their computer. Please note that for today's call, we are using a chat feature to submit questions, meaning only those in front of a computer will be able to submit questions for discussion during this call. So for those of you running to your computer at this point, please search for your confirmation email that includes the two-step instructions for joining the webinar. For those of you currently in front of your computer, you should be viewing a presenter screen with instructions for audio and submitting questions. When you join today's webinar, you selected to join by phone or by computer audio. If for any reason you would like to change your selection, you can do so by accessing your audio panel on the control window. The question panel is located in the control window in the upper right corner of your screen. You will have the opportunity to submit questions via text to today's presenter by typing your questions into the question panel of your control window. You may send in your questions at any time. We will collect these and address as many of them as possible during the Q&A session at the conclusion of Rick's comments. If your question was not addressed during the call, please know that it will be discussed by the directors at their upcoming meeting. If you have a question that you would like to ask or a comment you would like to share offline, you can do that with me at ceo@sigep.net. Again, that is ceo@sigep.net. Please also note that we will record today's session and send it to everyone in a follow-up communication. With that said, I would now like to pass it over to Grand President Rick Bennett.
Thanks, Brian. And thank you to all of you who have joined us today for taking your time and for your dedicated service to our national fraternity and to your local chapter. We really appreciate you being here. I'd like to speak to you today about some issues that the National Board has been wrestling with for a bit now. We have been in extensive deliberations on two major issues over the last year, and they are our declining relevance on campus and the increased risk that we face in many of our activities. A year and a half ago at our conclave, most of you know and remember the really wonderful undergraduate resolution to adopt the Balanced Man program universally throughout the fraternity. That was a major step forward and one that was celebrated extensively. One of the other undergraduate resolutions that didn't get quite as much recognition but has in many ways been equally powerful is the resolution to create 2 outside director seats on our board. We are the only fraternity to do that, and the intention was to bring some people from higher education into the boardroom and to create an effort to elevate our discussions on being a relevant and valued partner in higher education. Too often we get into our cocoon and our own personal experiences and don't hear from the outside world as to what's really going on. We appointed those 2 outside directors about 15 months ago, and they have been, I must tell you, really terrific. First, Dr. Cindy Love, the Executive Director of the ACPA, the College Student Educators Association, and Victor Wilson, who is the Vice President of Student Affairs at the University of Georgia. And I will tell you, they have really enabled us to have much better strategic discussion and elevated our game. With their help and with the help of Dr. Ed Hammond, who many of you know, we assembled a group of higher education specialists, university presidents, academics, administrators, along with our outside directors and our entire board for our board meeting a year ago in December. And we spent the entire board meeting focused on our relevance and being a valued partner in higher education. And we we learned what we all instinctively knew, that fraternities are becoming increasingly marginalized in higher education circles, and we have a lot of work to do on this important objective. Then a couple of months later in May, I joined Brian for discussions with our insurance providers in Philadelphia, and I must tell you, that was quite an eye-opening experience for me. Brian works with it every day, but the reality of what we're facing with our increased risk is really stunning. The cost of risk continues to grow. Our insurance premiums are actually up 46% over the last 2 years. And it's interesting, it's not that the claims are growing, the number of claims are growing so much, it's that the magnitude of the claims is growing exponentially as more and more media attention comes on bad fraternity behavior. We went there, and I will also say that going in, we recognize as we review all of the incidents that occur, that every single incident that has occurred during my 12 years on the board has involved alcohol, every single one of them. And it is the single common element of all the risks that goes throughout our fraternity. We went into the discussions knowing that sororities operate with a lot less risk and a lot lower insurance premiums, because we all know that the vast majority of sororities don't allow alcohol in their houses. They actually push that risk off on us. And so we went in with a bit of a feeling that it's probably 50% of the cost that we pay. Well, it's not 50%. It's not 25%. They pay 1/7 of what we pay. So not only have the sororities pushed their risk off on us, it's not that they drink much less, they just do it in our place. But in many ways, universities have pushed the risk off on us as well. So we have real challenges on both fronts of relevance and risk. From an aspirational side, we really aren't seen as a partner in higher education, and we continue to drift further and further from our cardinal principles as we become ever more centered on being a drinking club. And from a risk side, we will soon be uninsurable. Not only is the cost going up, but the ability for us to actually secure insurance is going to be something that comes into real question in the not too distant future. We therefore have both a shortfall on what we intend to be, as well as a real existential threat. This, my friends, is the burning platform on which we stand today. We spent our spring meeting and our fall meeting largely devoted to wrestling with these issues and discussing what, if anything, we could really do about them. Then we gathered this December in Houston to reach consensus and set our path forward, which brings us to this call. I sent a letter to all of you last week outlining our two basic objectives, which are: one, to get all of our facilities to operate on an alcohol-free basis. And we are specifically wording that to be substance-free, as we want to include illegal drugs as part of the basic positioning statement. But let us be very clear, our intention is to get alcohol out of our facilities and off of our premises. The second objective was to achieve universal adoption of our residential learning community environment, what we call RLC. There are 40 some odd chapters in the fraternity that are accredited RLCs. We believe this is the best model that SigEp operates under, and we would like to achieve universal adoption of the RLC environment in full coordination with our Balanced Man program, which has been universally adopted as of last summer, summer ago. We've received a lot of feedback from that letter, Brian and I, and many of you were understandably challenging about the practicality of these goals and anxious to hear our plan. I think that this is a lot like the situation as I think about it from my vantage point and my age. This is a lot like the situation our country found itself in the early 60s when the Russians beat us into space. Our country responded by setting an objective of putting a man on the moon by the end of the decade. But at that time the objective was set, we really didn't know how we would actually pull it off. but we were dedicated to figuring it out. We can't be afraid of change. We must work forward for what we aspire to be. And while we have a general outline of what we want to achieve, there are many tactics and details that need to be filled in. So the plan is being developed. But let's go through what our plan, the basics of the plan are now. We want to have all facilities be substance-free in 4 years. And as I said, to be clear, this is a drive to get alcohol off of our property. And I'll embellish upon that a little bit. Let me give you the rest of the objectives. We want to have all of our chapters working towards RLC status in 6 years. During the last period of time, we've spent most of our focus on the Balanced Man program and have not been fine-tuning the RLC program while we were working on that priority. What's become clear to us is that the RLC is the environment with which we operate in, while the Balanced Man program is the member development program that should operate in that environment in a fully integrated way. Specifically, the RLC is about dedicated space in the facility, dedicated faculty to building the environment, as well as the substance-free element of the environment. And this needs to be fully integrated with our Balanced Man program. We also know that we have to have a comparable program that is more robustly built out for our unhoused chapters. I mentioned we had 40 some odd RLC chapters today. 2 of those are unhoused, so unhoused works for unhoused chapters, absolutely. This is about the environment that we're setting. It is not dependent just on having a facility. We know that we need to redirect our recruitment efforts for this strategy. We need to redirect and intensify the recruitment efforts. And we believe that as we have depended on traditional rush, what we're doing is putting people that are interested in being involved in a drinking club at the center of our recruitment effort. And to make these kinds of changes, we're going to have to pivot on how we conduct recruitment. And to get to these 2 objectives of substance-free facilities and RLCs in all of our chapters, we have a couple of specific programs in addition to intensifying our recruitment strategy that we want to press forward. One will be rolled out this spring, which is to set up tiered insurance premiums for our chapters to both incent good behavior alcohol-free facilities, as well as charge a premium to chapters that have had incidents. That way we don't have our best chapters carrying the burden for our worst chapters, frankly, and we create incentives for people to encourage change from a bottom-up standpoint. And finally, we will include, as of 2 years from now, alcohol-free RLC status as a requirement for the Buchanan Cup going forward. High proficiency BMP with alcohol-free RLC status is our very best model and the way our best chapters work. Our timing for this, how we're going to roll this out, is we want to share our thinking and our goals with you and all of our involved volunteers during the calls yesterday and today. We will refine and develop our plans with your help. All politics is local, and we need to make sure that these programs are being interpreted appropriately at each location, which will be dependent upon your help and your guidance. We want to roll out the discussion at this year's Carlson's coming up next month and engage in the discussion between the alumni and the undergraduates. And then we want to position the grand chapter for undergraduate resolution to these initiatives this summer. Our fraternity is different than most. We don't do things from a top-down method coming from the board. We set the goals that we believe we need to achieve, and we get down into the field and make sure that this is a bottom-up effort. So it will be dependent upon undergraduate resolution this summer to actually ensure that we get on this path. It's not going to be an edict from the board. So that is an overview, Brian, of the objectives that we have set. We do have a general plan in place, but lots of work to do, and we are ready to have the discussion and interchange any questions that the members have on the call today.
Thank you, Rick. We're now going to begin answering questions for those that have submitted them as Rick was providing his comments. As a reminder, you can still submit questions through that question panel in your attendee control window. With that said, Rick, some of the questions that are coming in, why don't we start off with a question that is asking us to dig a little bit farther into how we're rolling this out to undergraduates. We've mentioned presenting this at Carlson, but that's only touching a fraction of our undergraduate population. What is the plan to get undergraduates to buy into this and achieve that goal of an undergraduate resolution at Conclave?
Right. Well, this will parallel, and Brian, you should chime in because you'll be on the ground with this, but this will parallel our efforts with the Balanced Man program adoption a year and a half ago. You know, we know there are several chapters that embrace this and have taken a leadership position already. We know where the chapters are that are willing and just need the nudge and the leadership, and we know the places where it's problematic. And so it is very much a customized approach by location. The staff will be involved. But look, this is all going to, you know, be dependent upon the ABCs buying into this and helping customize this at the local level. So we'll be dependent upon our volunteers to help spread the word. Brian is developing a white paper, if you will, as we go into Carlson so that we all have the same talking points to work off of. And we'll look, Carlson is where our leadership will be gathered. So it starts with the leadership. We'll socialize it there and roll forward from that. What would you add, Brian?
I'll just point out that the reason that we're starting with a call with alumni and volunteers is that any of these major efforts, the BMP being a great one and most recent one, has required that the National Board, the staff, and the volunteers on our ABCs are working toward a common vision. You are who our undergraduates turn to on a daily basis. So as soon as we have any of these conversations with them at a Carlson Academy, they're going to turn to you. And the last thing that we want to do is leave you unprepared to answer the questions, respond to any of the concerns that they may have. We want to put you in a position to provide us feedback on this vision and also be supportive of moving it forward. So I'll start with that before even getting into the undergraduates. Like most things also with undergraduates, there are probably going to be people who are early adopters and those who are just instinctively going to push back. And so I think that's just going to require us to be very thoughtful about how we engage in this discussion. With undergraduates, they are being surrounded on a daily basis by peers in fraternities that are not having this conversation, to be quite candid. We have seen a few fraternities try to move down this path successfully. Phi Delta being one, Beta Theta Pi has done a little bit of this as well, so there is some precedent. But in many ways, they're going to be looking around and seeing something very different on college campus, and that's going to make the role that you play as a volunteer mentor even more important. Rick, would you like to comment any further on that before I turn to another question?
No, let's go ahead.
Have you reached out to other fraternities to see if they are interested in pursuing this together? And are any other fraternities already doing this? I think we just touched on that a little bit. The more fraternities who take this position, the easier it might be to adopt.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things, and Brian and I will go back and forth on this. Brian mentioned that Phi Delta did this. They did it in a top-down manner. It was an edict from the board. As I said earlier, that's not our culture, that's not the way we work, and that's not the way we're going to handle this. But they have had a lot of success. Brian can fill in some of those details in a few minutes or a few moments. I would tell you that the NIC is engaged in this conversation. Ed Hammond has provided a lot of leadership there, and the NIC would like to move down this path on a campus-by-campus basis. So rather than doing it sort of, if you will, horizontally, fraternity by fraternity, their idea is to go vertically and do it campus by campus so that everybody can move at once. That's a fine idea. We certainly support it and will aggressively support it. The problem is the NIC is moving very slow, and we feel a level of urgency. I will tell you just very directly, we cannot stand by and wait for the next kid to die, and we will not. And I think this board feels very strongly about that. So Brian?
Yeah, Rick, there are a couple questions asking us to provide some greater detail on the results that Phi Delta and Beta Theta Pi have seen in terms of insurance costs and other costs or other performance metrics. And I'll start off with the insurance premium. Phi Delta has seen a 50% reduction in their insurance premiums today relative to when they started their substance-free facility initiatives. Phi Delta and Beta have the lowest insurance premium costs in the fraternity, certainly one of the fewest. With Phi Delta specifically, since they adopted this policy as an organization, they have seen their membership increase. They have seen retention increase. They have seen the number of donors and the growth of their endowment and their foundation increase, and they've also seen more alumni willing to volunteer as well. So when we look at all of those metrics, I mean, those are a lot of the high-level things that we look at as an organization to gauge how we're doing. And I'd say a lot of those statistics are similar with Beta. And Beta is often referred to right next to SigEp as leaders in the fraternity world. Their membership has continued to increase. Their claims and incidents have continued to increase, and they are tiptoeing down this path. And I think they're tiptoeing down this path because it's been very, very difficult, with Phi Delta being the only other group that is doing this consistently across the country. So to other questions of are other fraternities doing this, and would they be willing to work collaboratively with us, I would say yes. I think Beta would be much more aggressive in this policy. I think DU and several others would be much more aggressive in taking this stance and moving down this path. And then we would also be it would also be important to just mention that this will require some collaboration with our host institutions as well to have their support as we make this effort within our fraternity, and maybe a handful of others, that their support will be increasingly important. Rick, we'll switch gears a little bit with this next question. What do I tell my chapter that doesn't have a house or is not allowed to have a house about this RLC goal?
Well, I think that, as I mentioned earlier, we need to have a more robust program ready so that we bring more clarity to that kind of a question. Clearly, there are two very successful RLCs out there that are unhoused, and it's about adopting the philosophy of the RLC. It's not dependent on the facility, and as I pointed out, there are three components. One is dedicated space. That can be in a chapter house. That dedicated space can be somewhere else as well. Secondly, it is direct faculty involvement, and this comes in two ways. One, providing one-on-one counsel for undergraduates, and two, providing some level of curriculum for the chapter as a whole. And we will be building out some more specific options around ethics, decision-making, the kinds of skills that, what you'd love to have is a good, open chapter discussion around ethical decision-making, sponsored by a faculty member. That's the kind of thing that we want occurring in this environment, and building out some very specific options so that there are some programs that people could directly opt into is also part of our work. So it's about building an academic environment for the Balanced Man Development Program to thrive in, and it absolutely can happen for an unhoused chapter. And Brian and the staff have been charged by the National Board to build out that program, make it clear and easy to understand so that everybody can embrace this goal, and they'll have that work completed this spring.
Rick, there's another question here, this one from a faculty fellow. In my experience, the current members are trying to make changes, but they encounter challenges from alumni who don't want to see the chapter change. How do we address these goals with those alumni to get them on board?
It's a real problem, and I don't think we can minimize it or sidestep it. And I'll tell you, one of the practical things that we'll run into is we have had chapters, we have had real situations where terrific RLC chapters have adopted the alcohol-free facility, and the alumni want to come host an alcoholic party at homecoming, and the chapter's like putting up their hands going, help. So that's real, and it's something that we can't just wish away, nor do we have a silver bullet that will cure it. So I think that it's going to take all of us working on it, and you know, it's no different than when you were an undergraduate and you were a sophomore or junior trying to get something to happen, and there was a senior sitting in the back of the room throwing stuff at you. So it's the same dynamic that we've worked with, and we'll have to wrestle it.
Ray, there's a couple of them that kind of wind together here, so I'll try and break them apart and ask them one by one. Will our insurers make rates lower when we become alcohol-free?
The short answer to that is no. They're going to make rates lower when our incidents go down. And you know, if we adopt this universally faster rather than slower, can we get some breaks along the way? I think the answer to that is probably yes, but they're going to charge us based on incidents. That said, I will tell you, it is a very clear data out there about the incident rate involving alcohol, which I've said is 100%, and the amount of incidents that happen in alcohol-free facilities, they just don't occur. So there's a very tight correlation here, and while we won't get the upfront discount, the discount will flow through pretty quickly. I would also suggest to you that, you know, we've set this target for 4 years from now, and there's some magic about that 4 years. We had a lot of debate about, should it be 2 years, should it be 6 years, and frankly, the 2-year goal just was a bit out of reach from a practical standpoint that we could actually get it done. And 6 years, this issue is just too urgent to wait that long, so we settled on 4. But there is some magic in the fact that as we change our recruitment effort, we will have the entire population in 4 years from now converted off of next fall's recruitment, and the people in the room at Conclave next summer, you know, none of them will be in the chapter 4 years from now. So tactically speaking, there are some benefits from this 4-year target, and the undergraduates are always terrific at surprising us. They always rise up. They always have risen up to do the right thing. And I think one of the other little magic pieces of 4 years is they could easily come back to us and say, you know, not good enough. Let's do it in 2 years, and they write the resolution as 2. So I think that I articulate all of that because this is a fairly tight time frame, and we should be able to see the incident rate fall pretty dramatically in a period of 2 to 3 years as we move down this path, so that we can find ourselves with dramatically reduced insurance premiums 4 years ago when we crossed this threshold.
There's a tactical question about when the information regarding the tiered insurance plan will be made available. And Rick, I'll tackle that one and say to everyone, we will be sending out a communication. It'll come out under my name. It'll be early next week. This will be accompanying the spring bill. It is a little bit lengthy in terms of trying to communicate the changes, but it does provide detail on how this tiered insurance model has been implemented. As Rick explained earlier, we're sending these out prior to Carlson so that we can have a conversation at Carlson. The due date for spring bills is going to be flexible this year so that we can have this conversation before we're expected to pay the balance of the invoice. Continuing down this path, Rick, what do we do about off-site parties, and how do those type of events fit into this alcohol-free facility plan?
Well, what we want is managed outside events, not on our property. And so there's a lot of, we started surfacing this discussion last year at Carlson's. The board started, if you will, dangling these concepts out and warming up the group. And the biggest feedback, we get, the devil's advocate position is, well, you're just encouraging people to go somewhere else to drink, and now you're increasing the risk because they've got to drive home. So you're actually making it worse. I'd rather people got drunk at the house and stumbled upstairs. And that's just a devil's advocate position, is the nicest way I can put it, and it is a cop-out. For fraternities to register a party and to have an organization that monitors and sponsors those parties through what most universities require from a sponsorship is going to reduce the risk of the parties that we have, and this really is about creating an environment, an academic atmosphere at our house that has us focused on something else besides the keg in the backyard. So Brian, you can speak a little bit about sponsored parties and how our risk management encourages that today.
Yeah, for some time now, we have recommended that social events be managed by a third-party vendor at a third-party site. As we go down this path of substance-free housing, I think our focus on that education and facilitating that type of social activity is going to be exaggerated or emphasized even more. Certainly, there are a lot of people who are able to help us do this in a healthier way. And to kind of switch gears just a little bit in terms of why this also is important to us is, from my perspective as a staff person, we're starting to go down this path also with a belief that we need to help our undergraduates learn to communicate and socialize without alcohol. It is a skill and a behavior that is in many ways absent from those that are graduating from college today. Our fraternity talks about student development all of the time. We talk about academic success all the time, and there's a much longer conversation that we can have around how turning our focus away from alcohol and focusing on what we can do to develop healthy relationships without the dependency or presence of alcohol is going to be important to preparing our young men for a lifetime of success. Rick, to kind of go ahead.
Let me ask you to develop your comments some more. We've talked a lot about in these discussions. So far today we've covered a lot about the increased cost of insurance and our insurability. We've talked about our reputation and relevance with higher education, and we've spoken about creating an academic environment that's not dependent on alcohol, but we've really not talked at all about the demographics that are occurring today on universities, which is also a driver of this, and how traditional rush is, we're actually swimming upstream here. The current is really going towards what we're trying to accomplish here, not where we've traditionally been. So why don't you fill in some of the data that you've been able to gather there?
Yeah, sure. So we've looked at, as we've had these discussions, a couple of sources that have been very informative in helping us understand the behavior of students today. We've looked at Greek Life EDU, the Core Institute, Alcohol EDU, and a number of other entities as well. The research tells us that a strong majority of male students entering college today are non or moderate drinkers, and yet those numbers just are not reflected in an assessment of the fraternity men. the numbers are actually quite different. I mean, there's a very large gap between the average student and the average fraternity man when we look at propensity to drink. And then further, when you look at heavy episodic and problematic drinking rates in our population, for fraternities, they are twice that of the average male student. And this research goes on to talk about the percentage of fraternity men falling behind in schoolwork relative to the average men. It's 30% for fraternity men, 7% for the average male. 28% of fraternity men report missing classes due to alcohol-related activity relative to 6% of the all-male average. So there's just a lot of these statistics that are lining up that would suggest we need to start talking to a different student, the majority of the students on campus that may not be thinking about joining fraternity today because of the reputation that we have and our inability to prove them otherwise through our actions and what they read about in the paper. Rick, is there anything else you'd like me to add there? There's another question that's kind of piggybacking this comment, and that is, I think the question reads, I think that an 18-year-old is going to have a difficult time understanding these goals from an insurance angle. How do we talk about some of these to an 18 or 19-year-old that doesn't have the exposure to insurance and risk, is new to the fraternity, and hasn't had a relevancy conversation?
Yeah, well, I think that's a very insightful comment, and I would tell you that our undergraduate directors spent a lot of time on that subject. Just penalizing people by charging them a higher premium or creating an incentive, they were very clear is not going to be enough to get this done. So those are a piece of the puzzle, and they wanted to redirect us to the much more aspirational side. About what we want to achieve, and the fact is our cardinal principles revolve around building better men and not around being a drinking club. So where fraternities have evolved to is just completely different than what the founders had in mind and the principles with which we operate, and quite frankly the value that each of us has received from the fraternity. The deep stories of brotherhood, of learnings, of value that have been created, aren't about a keg of beer and aren't about the drinking experience. So when you talk about brotherhood and the aspiration of what we achieve and the value that we bring, it does not involve alcohol. So I think we have to turn the conversation to what it is we want to be, and what it is that the value that we really bring, which is building leadership skills, building social skills, as Brian articulated early. How do you have a good social discussion without a beer in your hand, and how do you sell yourself, and all of the kinds of things that we do that bring so much value to all of our lives. That's where the discussion has to be.
Rick, there are questions from volunteers at AVCs who own facilities who are concerned about some of the downside potential of moving in this direction. There are questions about occupancy, being able to fill the house, and actually being able to pay the bills. Can you comment on that a little bit?
Well, sure, and I'd say that sword cuts two ways. There's the decline in membership affects our national budget as well as it affects a local housing budget. So I would magnify the question to say it's even a bigger deal than what's being asked, and it's real. So I think, first of all, that's why we're not by edict saying next fall all the houses are dry. We're not doing that. We're looking for a bottom-up groundswell and giving it time through our recruitment effort to make sure we have the beds full, and that in fact our membership is growing, not declining, because we're recruiting the right people over a period of time. So the temporal element here is there so that we have time to make sure that we don't fall back. Now, when we went into the BMP resolution a year and a half ago, we as a board fully knew and were prepared for a fall off on manpower because we felt it was the right thing to do. We knew it was the right thing to do. And we have had a modest decline in manpower as we have gone through some membership reviews, and people that just don't want to be into the program have got to go find something else to do. We were even prepared for some chapter closures. Now, fortunately, we really only had one chapter out of all of them that opted out because of the BMP, so that actually turned out better than we thought it might. So there can be some short-term risk here as people step up to the plate. I think Phi Delt will show us that over the long term, we'll end up in a much better place. So we do have that to rely on, and we have time to put this into place.
Rick, how will the National Fraternity police or ensure compliance with the alcohol-free policy?
Well, that's a terrific question, and I will tell you, as Grand President and our board feels very strongly about this, we are not going to ask our regional directors or the headquarters staff to become a police agency. That's not the way this guy's going to work. That's not that's not the kind of activity. A, it just won't work, period. And B, it's not what we want to ask our staff to do. So this is going to come just like BMP at the local level. We're going to create incentives. We're going to create awards. We're going to provide the education, the coaching, the counseling. We will depend on our volunteers to help push this ball along, and this will not be a national policing effort.
Rick, what opportunities do we see to partner with universities on this? Fraternity and sorority life offices, and then the question goes on to talk about how exactly can we partner with our host institutions to drive these goals forward?
Yeah, terrific question. So first of all, we have finished a positioning statement several months ago. It's being used in our publications, which talks about being a valued partner in higher education and the values that we try to bring to our experience, so that we have that aspirational messaging at work today. And Brian, I think maybe in the follow-up materials you could have that positioning statement as be an attachment so that people can see the exact wording of it. So that's in place today. I think that we will come through these discussions at CLA and begin to be able to push out through our media some of the activities. I think the culmination of this will be Grand Chapter Resolution next summer, and I would envision a major public relations effort out there to all of our university partners with that resolution behind us. So I see this as a ramp up. Begins with a positioning statement and ends up with a major flurry of public relations at the end of next summer when we're done with the resolution.
Rick, I'll add to this. We've been talking about how we've strengthened our relationship with our host institutions for some time, and a lot of what we were doing, I think, drove a lot of the change that we've seen within the NIC, the North American Interfraternity Conference, which is the conference for all fraternities, and turned a lot of attention towards what do we do to add value, not just what do we do to defend our right to exist. As we've continued to push this partnership message within that community, we've also requested stronger relationships with senior student affairs conferences. So a lot of you on the call may have heard of NASPA. It's a Senior Student Affairs Association. A lot of VPs, presidents are association members, and we will be meeting with this group. About 75 or so student affairs vice presidents will be at their annual convention in March in San Antonio, and a number of fraternity and sorority leaders are going to be participating in a and a large discussion about what we do to address these issues of relevancy and risk. And there have been a lot of points that have been made in the question panel about focusing on maybe less the insurance and more about safer environments, a valuable experience, and how alcohol is getting in the way of that. And I think those points are well made. I'd love to get there with our host institutions. I feel that step one right now is tell me how you're not going to create a risk management issue for me on my campus. And I believe that's step one. And then that gets into relevancy. But I wanted to bring up the fact that there is going to be a large and important discussion that's taking place this spring with senior student affairs members, and that'll give us an opportunity to have a lot more clarity on ways that we can partner with them to advance this vision. Rick, we're getting close to the end here, so we're trying to narrow it down to a few questions. One that's popped up here a couple of times is, what are the consequences for not achieving this vision?
Well, Brian and I talked about that a little bit yesterday, so glad you brought it up. And it's interesting. We answered it from two completely different angles. You know, Brian's response to me when I asked him was, well, if we don't achieve this vision, we die. You know, our relevance continues to go down, our insurability continues to go up, and at some point they cross each other and we don't exist. So his answer was completely existential. I came at it from just a little bit different vantage point. And I was just sort of, my head was more focused on the timeline of the objective, and my answer is, if we don't achieve these objectives, then we just keep working at it. Just two different answers to the same question. Look, I would say, unfortunately, the BMP adoption, universal adoption, took way too long. It took 20 years, and that really is silly that as the leader that we are, it would take us that long to complete the dial. And I was, you know, I've been on the board 12 years, so I was here for 12 of the 20, and we were just very nervous about forcing anything and trying to do it at a grassroots level bit by bit. And I think that if we had to do it over again, we would have charged the hill much more aggressively. In this case, we're talking about people's lives. And so we must go faster. We can't take 20 years on this. Whether we pull it off in 4 or not, that's where I come to the answer. If we don't have it done in 4, then we keep working at it and just make sure that we get there. This is an aspiration that we must strive to achieve.
Rick, there are also a lot of questions around what can we as volunteers do to help. As an additional thought there, are there any thoughts on key ABC positions that would be targeted to watch over and help move these goals forward?
Well, I think there's a lot of very specific tactical things that everybody can do to help, and then there are some broader general things. So first of all, we've got to get the word out there that we're going down this path. So the beginning is just to build awareness of where we're going and begin to socialize it. It takes time for things to settle in on people's minds. I learned a long time ago, you can't just wake up one day and tell everybody we're going to make a hard right turn tomorrow and expect everybody to follow. So give it some time, socialize it, talk it up. These are smart young men that want to do the right thing. And so there's some self-discovery here that's important and part of what we do. So take the time to socialize it, let people talk it through, and the first and biggest thing that all of you can do is participate in that sort of mentoring and discussion, and we would ask all of you to come to a Carlson and be part of that discussion. Secondly is balanced man proficiency. Proficiency in that program. We know that the higher the proficiency of the balanced man program, the more likely the chapter is ready to be alcohol-free and be an RLC candidate, because the BMP just encourages the kind of thinking and not the focus on drinking that we want. So BMP proficiency is another very specific tactic. Recruitment, try and begin to turn us away from traditional rush, because that is just providing a funnel of people that want to be in a drinking club, and start to rely more and more heavily on the Balanced Man Scholarship. Actually, there's some really cool things that the staff is working on, just to sort of give you a bit of a tidbit of what's in the works. I mean, you all know about the Balanced Man Scholarship, and it's obvious that we want to use that as a means to drive recruitment of the kind of people that we're after. But the idea on the table is, what if we can endow some national scholarships that the individual local winners could apply for, a bigger scholarship as a winner of a national competition, and then be able to take that program and put it out there on the internet. You know, that people could apply through our national site and get to the local chapter by looking for scholarships. We could provide that digitally to every high school in the country, and certainly target that regionally around our chapters, so that people were interested in the Balanced Man Scholarship before they ever got to college. So lots of cool stuff that can be done with the internet and taking this activity nationally. So I digress for a minute, but that's the kind of exciting idea that we might be able to, well, we're going to embark on. And then I think it's about the ABCs getting together and saying, listen, this is the right thing for our chapters to be a substance-free facility that is an RLC environment. That is the best way for us to survive and thrive and be a better partner, and bring this to the local level. As I said, all politics is local. You know the players, both alumni and undergraduates, and it's going to take a team effort on the ABC to think about what the best way is to strategize these efforts at the local level.
Rick, to get a little deeper into that of what we can do to help, there are questions around specifically, should we be having conversations with undergraduates prior to Carlson? So should we begin socializing this conversation with them prior to going to their Carlson, or should they wait to hear this at the Carlson itself?
You should weigh in on that, Brian, but my advice is we should start socializing as soon as the opportunity provides itself. So I don't know that I'd call a chapter meeting and run in tomorrow and say, okay, headline folks, Nationals pulling your charter if you don't go alcohol-free. I would not go that way. But I think if the opportunity, when the opportunity provides itself, to say, where is this fraternity going, and what are the realities around risk, around insurance, around being a partner, the sooner you can start those conversations going with the executive committee and at the full chapter, the better. So to me, this is an evolution and a continuum of work, and I wait for the right window where people are receptive and want to have the conversation, and if that happens before Carlson's, then dive in. And if that doesn't happen before Carlson, then you can use Carlson to launch it at your chapter. Brian, what's your opinion?
Well, I'll reiterate a couple of things that have come up on this call, and we're starting to have this conversation with volunteers for a reason. One is the success of the organization is very much dependent upon the work of our volunteers. Volunteers are the consistency at the chapter level, and nothing that we try to do as an organization nationally is possible without the work that our volunteers, our ABCs, do. And I would suggest strongly that the conversation needs to be had among the volunteers first, so that any questions, concerns can be socialized as a group before talking to undergraduates, because the first people that undergraduates are going to talk to are the volunteers. There are a lot of people on this call today, but there are also a lot of people who are invited that could not make it, and we'll be sending out a recording of this so that they can hear this discussion. But I would also echo Rick's comments that We're dealing with a lot of very smart young men, and they should be brought into this conversation as soon as possible. I just wouldn't jump at it too soon when they may run to a volunteer who has not had this discussion yet. So that would be just my one caveat to this. With that said, Rick, are there any other things that you'd like to add before we wrap up?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Rick, and thank you also to everyone who has joined us on today's call. If you have any other questions, please reach out following the conclusion of today's discussion. Once you leave today's call, you will receive a follow-up email with a link to a recording of today's conversation. On behalf of SigEp and our National Board of Directors, thank you for joining us today, and have a great afternoon. I hope to see many of you at Carlson. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.